June had never been told no. Not by his mother, not by anyone else. At 20, he believed the world existed to serve him. Every wish, every whim, every careless desire was indulged. Clubs, alcohol, late-night parties, women. He took what he wanted and left destruction in his wake. In the mansion, he was a storm that swept through hallways, breaking rules and anyone's patience. He yelled, laughed, kicked furniture, and the staff silently tolerated him because they had no choice. Ashley moved through the mansion like a shadow. 10 years older than him, she carried herself with calm precision. She managed the household, kept the rooms in order, prepared meals, oversaw the servants, and cleaned up the messes left by June's reckless behavior. She had watched him grow from a spoiled child into a reckless young man, and with each passing year, her resentment had grown quietly beneath a mask of professionalism. She had long ago learned that discipline and authority meant nothing against him. All that mattered was survival. From the moment she had started working in the mansion, she had noticed the way June treated people. He mocked the servants, humiliated women, and laughed at anyone who dared disapprove. He was arrogant, entitled, and cruel when it suited him. She disliked him fiercely, but she never allowed herself to show it openly. The mansion demanded discretion. June's mother fueled his arrogance. She coddled him, excused his every action, and dismissed any complaints against him with a wave of her hand. "He's young," she would say. "He'll grow out of it." And so he did not. Years of indulgence had made him careless, reckless, and confident that nothing could touch him. Even in the day-to-day moments, June's arrogance dominated the household. He would stumble into rooms unannounced, slur his words, mock Ashley for asking him to do even the smallest thing. "Why are you always cleaning?" he jeered one morning. "The house can look like a pigsty, and it doesn't matter." Ashley's dark eyes narrowed. "The house is not yours to destroy," she said, keeping her voice steady. She had learned to measure her words carefully, but sometimes she could not stop herself. He laughed, leaning against the doorway, smirking. "And yet you clean it anyway." "Why?" Ashley said nothing. There was no point. Words would not teach him respect. He didn't care about respect, about discipline, about anything that did not revolve around him. Even the other servants had learned to step aside. When he demanded things, they obeyed, not out of loyalty, but fear. The mansion's walls echoed with the sound of his carelessness. Glasses broke, furniture toppled, servants whispered in corners. But he never faced consequences. Not from his mother, not from anyone. That night, the mansion was unusually quiet. The staff had retired to their quarters, and June returned from another club, reeking of alcohol and smoke. His laughter, loud and sharp, bounced off the walls. He swayed as he walked, kicked a vase carelessly, and sneered at the shadows in the hallway. Ashley was in one of the rooms, tending to chores, preparing for the night. She straightened sheets, checked the fire in the hearth, and organized the room with care. She had a sense that something was off. His presence in the hallway was more chaotic than usual, more dangerous. Her heart beat faster. He appeared in the doorway, staggering slightly. "Ashley," he said, his voice slurred. "What are you doing here?" "I'm not working," she said, her voice steady but tense. "It's late, June. You should rest." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Rest? I don't need rest. I need attention." He stepped closer, the shadows flickering across his face, sharp and cruel. He held something in his hand, a knife, glinting in the dim light. Ashley froze. The knife wasn't just a threat, it was a reminder of how untouchable he was. She tried to step back, tried to reason with him. "June, please. Put it down," she whispered. He laughed again, a sound that made her stomach turn. "Don't move." She could see it then, the full truth. He had no respect for her. No care for boundaries. He would take what he wanted, and she could do nothing. The mansion seemed to close in around them. The fire flickered, the shadows danced, and the night held its breath. Ashley's mind raced. What could she do? How could she protect herself? But she was 10 years older, stronger in spirit, and yet entirely powerless against the arrogance and force of a man who had been spoiled his whole life. This night, this hallway, this room, everything was a turning point. The calm, measured life Ashley had maintained in the mansion, the quiet strength that had carried her through years of disrespect and humiliation, was about to collide with June's reckless, entitled world in a way that would leave permanent scars. Even as she moved cautiously, silently, doing everything she could to avoid confrontation, the storm had already arrived. And that storm, June, drunk, armed with a knife, consumed by entitlement, was about to change everything. The night air in the mansion was thick with silence. The chandeliers cast cold, flickering light across the polished floors, but it did nothing to calm the tension that had settled over Ashley. She had sensed him before she even saw him, a presence, heavy, unstable, dangerous. June staggered into the room, reeking of alcohol, sweat, and arrogance. His eyes were glassy but sharp with entitlement. He grinned at her, cruel and teasing, as though the world were a toy and she was part of the game. "Why are you standing there?" he slurred. "Come closer." Ashley's heart raced. She backed toward the wall, instinctively putting distance between them. "June, please. I just want to do my work. Please, leave me be." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Leave you be? Why? I don't like you standing there, looking all proper. I want you." His hand flicked toward the knife at his belt. Fear gripped her in a way she had never experienced. She knew he could do it, that he had no reason to stop. Her voice was trembling now. "No. Please, don't." But her words fell into the emptiness of his arrogance. He stepped closer, forcing her to the corner. Every instinct screamed for her to fight, to resist, but he was stronger, faster, and fueled by the recklessness of a life without limits. When it happened, the world became a blur. Pain, terror, shame, and disbelief crashed into Ashley all at once. She could not understand how someone she had known in the periphery of her daily life, someone so young and untamed, could be capable of this. Her body trembled, her mind screamed, but she survived, even as her spirit fractured. Hours later, when he finally left, staggering into the shadows of the mansion corridors, Ashley sat on the floor, shaking, unable to breathe. The room seemed smaller, oppressive, suffocating. The silence pressed down on her like a physical weight. She wanted to cry, to scream, to call someone, anyone, but the thought of what might happen if she did paralyzed her. By dawn, she had made a decision. She had to tell someone. She could not carry this alone. She went directly to June's mother, her hands trembling, voice low but firm. Her words faltered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her mother looked at her, the practiced calm of a woman who had always controlled everything. No shock, no horror, just a measured gaze that dissected Ashley like a problem to be solved. "Sit," she said. Her voice was flat, cold. "Tell me everything." Ashley spoke, each word jagged, raw, heavy with shame and pain. She explained what had happened, her trembling hands clutching at her sides. She expected anger. She expected protection. She expected punishment for the boy who had ruined her life. What she got instead was silence, calculation, and a warning. "You will keep this to yourself," June's mother said. Her eyes were sharp, dangerous. "No one can ever know. Do you understand?" Ashley's stomach dropped. "But..." "No," her mother interrupted, voice hard. "Do you understand? If anyone finds out, if you speak, you will regret it. I promise you that." Ashley felt a chill settle in her bones. She nodded mutely. She had been silenced, threatened, trapped by her own sense of honor and the cold power of the woman who had raised June. Weeks passed. Ashley tried to return to normal, to continue her work, but something inside her had shifted. She was no longer just a caretaker of the mansion. She was a woman carrying a secret that would change her life forever. She began to notice subtle changes in her body, nausea, fatigue, and the undeniable truth. She was pregnant. The moment she realized, fear struck her like a fist. She had no one to turn to, no ally, and she knew the mother would not tolerate it. When the signs could no longer be hidden, June's mother confronted her, fury masked as control. "You will end this," she demanded. "Do you understand? You will get rid of it. It cannot exist." Ashley's hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the life inside her kicking, wriggling, fighting, surviving already. She swallowed the fear. "No," she said quietly, but firmly. "I will not." The mother's eyes darkened. Lies were spun immediately. Ashley was accused of sleeping with a security guard, of being careless, of bringing disgrace to the family. The mansion no longer offered safety. Humiliation and exile were immediate. Ashley was forced out, banished with nothing but the secret she carried and a determination to survive. She left the mansion at night, walking through the silent streets, her body heavy, her heart heavier. Every step was a reminder that her life had changed forever. She was alone, but she was determined. She would protect her child. She would survive. And she would make sure that the boy she carried would grow strong, no matter what. The slums were a jungle, and Ashley had learned to navigate it like a seasoned predator. The air was thick with smoke, the smell of rotten refuse, the cries of children, barking dogs, and merchants shouting over one another. Every corner had danger lurking: thieves, gangs, drunk men, and worse. But Ashley had no choice. She had no home, no protection, and only one life that mattered: the child she carried, and later, the son she would raise. In the first weeks after leaving the mansion, she slept in alleys, using tattered blankets to keep warm, clutching her stomach and whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Food was scarce, water often unsafe, and every step in the streets carried risk. She scavenged, begged when necessary, and accepted work wherever she could find it. Washing clothes, cleaning small homes, running errands for people who barely tolerated her presence. Each day was a battle. When the child was born, the streets were no kinder. He was tiny, fragile, with a faint, persistent cry that tore at Ashley's heart. She had never held something so small and precious, and yet so vulnerable. The world had been cruel to her, but she vowed this boy would survive. "I'll protect you," she whispered as she rocked him to sleep under the flickering light of a broken street lamp. "I swear it. No matter what." Life in the slums was relentless. She had to constantly keep an eye out for danger, people who might rob them, stray dogs that could attack, and the hidden cruelty of those who saw weakness as an invitation. Every day was about survival, finding food, staying dry, and keeping her son alive. She would wake before dawn, moving silently to avoid trouble, and scavenge what she could. Leftover vegetables from the markets, stale bread, even scraps that others discarded, every morsel counted. Her son grew fast. He learned quickly. By the age of 5, he could navigate the alleys, recognize danger, and run faster than anyone chasing him. He laughed often, though cautiously, and looked to his mother for approval and guidance. Ashley taught him rules without being heavy-handed, eyes open. Watch everything. People are not always kind. But we survive. We always survive. She also taught him small joys, finding a clean puddle to splash in, sharing a small meal of rice and vegetables, listening to stories she told about courage and resilience. In these moments, the harshness of their life softened, and for a little while, the world felt less cruel. Years went by, each day blending into the next. The boy grew strong and clever, shaped by hardship but tempered by Ashley's love. He could read people, sense threats, and stand his ground when necessary. He was mischievous, curious, and surprisingly fearless, yet he never lost his innocence. Ashley watched him closely, proud but constantly worried. One scrape, one fall, one wrong person noticing them could destroy everything. Ashley's life was not without fear or pain. She battled exhaustion, sickness, and the constant gnawing anxiety that someone from June's world might track her down. She never let her son see the full extent of her fear, only teaching him vigilance and awareness. She carried the weight of her past, but it was hidden behind her strength. She also wondered about June, though rarely aloud. Did he know? Did he even think of them? Sometimes, when the boy slept and the streets were silent, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility, that he had changed, that he might one day come back, but she quickly crushed such thoughts. Hope was dangerous. It could leave them exposed, soft, vulnerable. Yet, the years gave her something the mansion never had: independence, strength, and a deep, unshakable bond with her son. She had no one to protect her but herself, and she had learned that she could do it. Every challenge, every hungry day, every harsh night in the slums had made her sharper, faster, stronger. She had survived, and she had ensured her son did too. The boy, now nearing 10, began to understand more about the world than Ashley wished he would. He noticed the wary looks, the whispered voices, the dangers she tried to shield him from. But he trusted her completely. His laughter, small but persistent, echoed through the alleyways as they navigated their harsh reality together. He was clever, bold, and instinctively cautious, a reflection of the mother who had raised him alone. Ashley also noticed something subtle. He had inherited part of his father's intensity, the same sharp gaze she remembered from June. But he had none of June's recklessness, only a survival instinct that had been honed through necessity. Watching him grow, she felt both pride and fear. The boy was strong, yes, but could he survive if June ever came back? The thought haunted her, even as they shared small joys, scavenging for a fresh loaf of bread, teaching him to read by candlelight, or simply laughing together when the world allowed a brief reprieve. Their life was harsh, raw, relentless, but it was theirs. And every day they survived was a victory against the cruel world that had tried to destroy them. Ashley often held her son at night, listening to the quiet hum of the slums. She whispered stories of strength, of resilience, of the importance of survival and love. And in those moments, she allowed herself a flicker of hope, however small, that they could endure, that they could grow, that they could face whatever came next. And somewhere deep in her heart, a warning persisted. June was out there. One day, he might come looking. And when he did, everything they had built, everything they had survived, could be threatened once again. But for now, they had each other. And that was enough. 10 years had passed. The mansion had grown quieter, the grandeur of wealth and power carrying an unspoken tension. June had matured in age, though not in wisdom. He still carried the arrogance and entitlement of youth, but now it was tempered by subtle impatience and unfulfilled desires. Nights of indulgence had left their marks, slight wrinkles, a heavier jawline, a weariness behind his sharp eyes. But what he hadn't expected was the one thing he couldn't fix, the impossibility of producing an heir. The day began as ordinary, yet the air in the mansion was charged with expectation. His mother was in the study, seated behind her dark wooden desk, the soft rustle of papers the only sound. A thick envelope had arrived from the MAFIA cabinet, a formal letter outlining the necessity for him to produce an heir before he could claim his inheritance. June entered, kicking off his shoes with casual irritation. His jacket slid from his shoulders, draping over a chair as he flopped down, clearly annoyed. "Mother," he said, rubbing his temples. "Do we really need to go over this again? I've been through everything they are asking. I've tried. I've done everything a man could do, you know." His voice trailed off, frustration mingling with disbelief. His mother did not flinch. She was calm, poised, her eyes dark and calculating. "June, the cabinet is serious. This is not a suggestion. This is a requirement. Before you claim your father's empire, the wealth, the properties, everything, you must produce an heir. Without one, nothing is yours." June groaned, leaning back and staring at the ceiling as if the weight of her words were absurd. "I've tried," he muttered. "Doctors, countless women, nothing works. It's not my fault." She raised an eyebrow, her lips tight. "Perhaps it is time to face reality. A proper medical checkup could clarify matters. You may be overlooking something. Or perhaps the problem lies not in your attempts, but in yourself." Pride warred with fear in June's chest. He had never been denied anything, never faced limits he could not overcome with money, influence, or sheer charm. Yet here he was, forced to confront the unthinkable, that his own body might betray him. Reluctantly, he agreed. The medical examination was clinical and unforgiving. Blood tests, scans, consultations. Doctors spoke in precise, impersonal tones. The results came with a blunt finality: impotence. "You are unlikely to father a child naturally," the doctor said. "Your condition is permanent. Years of reckless behavior, alcohol, frequent infections, untreated injuries, have caused irreversible damage." June felt the floor tilt beneath him. The words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of him. Rage, denial, shame, and fear collided violently inside his chest. How could this be? He, June, the man who had always had everything, could be powerless in the most fundamental way? Could not leave a legacy, could not continue the family bloodline? He left the clinic in silence, the city passing in a blur around him. Pride, arrogance, and entitlement, the traits that had defined him, clashed with a sudden, unfamiliar vulnerability. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. An heir is required. Before any inheritance, before any control, before the empire is truly yours. If you cannot produce one, there will be consequences. For the first time, June felt true panic. All his privileges, all the indulgence, all the careless nights of reckless behavior, everything that had defined him, had led him here. And now the empire his mother had promised, the power and wealth he had always assumed would fall into his hands, was contingent on a reality he could not control. Days passed in a haze of anger and denial. June tried every remedy, every treatment, every doctor, but nothing changed the truth. His impotence was permanent. Each failed attempt to fix himself felt like a reminder of his recklessness, his arrogance, and the long-forgotten cruelty of his past. And then, a thought surfaced that he could not shake. One night, lying awake in the dark, he remembered Ashley. The maid. The quiet, older woman who had borne his reckless youth. The night long buried in shame, the night he had never truly faced in memory or consequence. Could it be possible? Could there be a child somewhere, a son, alive, growing, unknowing, carrying the one thing he could never achieve on his own? The thought was terrifying. His inheritance, his legacy, his family's expectations, all hinged on something he had ignored, something he had destroyed. And yet, if the child existed, it was the only path forward. His mother's voice returned, sharp and unyielding, "Find the child. That is the only way to secure your inheritance and legacy. Do not fail." June clenched his fists. Rage, shame, fear, and a flicker of determination coalesced. He would find this child. He would find Ashley. And somehow, he would reclaim the inheritance that had been promised to him since birth. But more than that, a new feeling crept in, uneasy, unfamiliar, regret. For the first time, June realized that the consequences of his past were not abstract, not distant, they were real. They were alive, walking through alleys somewhere in the city, innocent, thriving, and entirely unaware of the father who had created and abandoned them. And with that, a new chapter began, the search for the child he never knew, the mother he had wronged, and the reckoning he had long avoided. The city smelled of smoke, wet concrete, and decay, just as it had 10 years ago, but June walked through it with a very different purpose. Every step through the slums carried weight, tension, and a gnawing fear he hadn't felt since youth. 10 years of recklessness, indulgence, and arrogance had led him here, chasing a child he had never known, and a woman he had destroyed. Then he saw her. Ashley. Older, hardened, fierce. The years in the slums had carved her lean, strong, and alert. Her dark skin shone under the weak afternoon sun. Beside her, a small boy, lean, wiry, and cautious, watched the street with wariness that made June's chest tighten. June froze. Memories of the past, the night he had ruined her life, the threats, the secrets she had carried alone, crashed into him. Rage, fear, guilt, and despair collided, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. Ashley's eyes locked onto his. Recognition flashed, and then, explosive fury. "June!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the alleys like a whip. Every passerby turned to look, but Ashley didn't care. You monster. You think you can just show up after 10 years? Before he could move, she grabbed a handful of small stones from the ground and hurled them at him. They bounced off his chest and arms, but the message was clear, she would not tolerate his presence. The boy squealed, ducking instinctively behind her, and June felt a stab of shame pierce him deeper than any blow. "You left us," she yelled, pacing, hands flailing, eyes wide and dark with rage. "You left me to fight for my life and his. You abandoned us. Do you understand what 10 years of survival feels like? You think you can just show up now and everything will be fixed?" June opened his mouth, tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to apologize, but his words stuck. 10 years of pain, fear, and struggle could not be erased with a few sentences. Ashley's fury escalated. She grabbed a broken wooden plank from the ground and hurled it with all her strength. "Get out! Get out of my sight!" she shouted, voice raw, trembling with anger. "You don't deserve to see him. You don't deserve a word from me. You ruined everything, and now you show up like you own the world." The boy clung to her, hiding behind her legs, eyes wide and alert. June stood frozen, overwhelmed. Shame, guilt, anger, and helplessness coursed through him. He had nothing to offer but silence, nothing to defend himself with but regret, and even that felt hollow against the raw force of her fury. Ashley's final act of defiance came with a shove toward her son, pulling him inside the small shack. She slammed the door shut with a deafening bang, leaving June standing in the alley, arms empty, chest aching, and heart pounding. The alley fell silent. June's mind was still spinning, processing the fury, the rejection, the physical blows, and the weight of 10 years of consequences. And then, a voice cut through the quiet, cold and commanding, echoing off the walls of the alley. "Take her and the child. I have no time to waste with this filth," the voice ordered. June's heart froze. He recognized it instantly. His mother. Her tone left no room for negotiation, no doubt, no mercy. Shadows moved rapidly from the corners of the alley. A group of men, lean, armed, and efficient, surrounded the shack in moments. Before June could react, the door burst open, and Ashley screamed, struggling to shield her son. But the men were too many, too fast. They grabbed her, pulling her away while she kicked and shouted, her voice cracking with anger and fear. "Let go! I said leave us alone!" she yelled, throwing fists, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. June could only stand frozen, powerless, as his mother's order was executed flawlessly. Ashley's struggles were fierce but ultimately futile. Her son's small cries echoed in the alley as they were pulled into the shadows, disappearing from sight. June's chest tightened, his hands balling into fists. He wanted to move, to intervene, but he was alone, broken, and unprepared. If you'd like to see the next episode, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It'll help the channel a lot. Thank you and God bless.